And so today's Thursday, February the 6th, 2025. And we're glad you've joined us. And I'm going to give you an update on Ryan, and then I'm going to turn the phone over to Michael. He got home last night, and Michael and I were already over there and fixed dinner for them. And he's doing very well. He still has some swelling. He's sore, of course, has some battle wounds. But he looked a lot better than he's looked in several weeks. So we're blessed and we're thankful. And he still has a way to go. But anyway, keep us in prayer. And I'm going to turn this over to Michael. I'll turn it down because it's echoing.
You can just close the door and I'll take care of it. Welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. Did we get to play again? Joe, delighted. And I don't know for sure, Joan, is that you back there in the guest slot? If so, if you open the app, you can talk to us directly too. So, yo. So welcome. Yes, Ryan is doing really well. He had another stint in the hospital where they put a drain, actually drilled a hole in his brain and put a shunt in to drain excess cerebral spinal fluid down. They put the drain down through his neck, over his collarbone, and into his abdomen, so the excess fluid drains there instead of builds up pressure and creates headaches for him. So, but he got an instant upgrade in health with that. So we're delighted that that's occurred, and we're definitely appreciative of everybody's support and the presence of love that everybody brings. Glad you're with us. Susan, you made it in today. I heard you had trouble getting into the show yesterday. I'm not sure what happened there. We're still working with a few challenges, but it seems like we're getting better and better every day at it. So that's awesome. And I'll open the space before I drop into the next section of what we've been doing for the last few days. I was really delighted with the way yesterday's presentation came together. And I can only imagine it's raised some questions the last couple of days, but we haven't had many. So if you're out there in listener land, if you push the call button, and then it opens a little menu that you have to check off, I don't know, one or two things, and then you hit call again, then that'll put a hand up and I'll know you want to talk to us, that you've got a question or a thought or something to share. So go ahead and hit that button. And welcome, Natalie. We haven't seen you in a while. Glad you're here. And we are going to step forward. We're looking at this whole process of forgiveness. Once again, running through the dynamics of it. And we just finished yesterday talking about how the cell only has contact with the world. You know, we're here. The ultimate overarching thing is we're looking at the cause and the healing of all disease processes, what's involved in the disease process. And so the cell is designed to get accurate energetic information brought in through our eyes, processed by our brain, and fed to the cell. As well as when we think a thought, that thought produces an actual molecule, a neuropeptide, that when it appears in the structure, the non-physical becoming physical, ends up circulating throughout the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches and shows up in the cell as what we call chemistry. Now, when we interrupt the process of giving the cell information that is accurate about the actuality of what's going on in the world, and we interpret or we insert an artificial construct, a made-up world called perception, and remember that perception is simply a construct of the mind that reflects everything resonated by goals we hold for a situation or resonated by the situation itself. So when we do that substitution, all of a sudden the cell is cut off from its accurate feedback. So you know, the false perceptual construct now inserted, instead of awareness based in truth and love being at the root of perception, that construct called perception is massaged into appearing as the present. It fools the cell, it fools us. And an internal construct is not showing us the external world accurately if perception is interrupted. So this process of substitution being what happens inside of most people tricks them into believing that their realities are true about the world, when the truth is they're only true about the source of the construct called perception that we have, and that is the cellular structure. So we end up in an errant feedback loop when we live in any reality based in any form of hostility or fear. So there's a key point. Hostility or fear is the indicator that the mind is using false data, and therefore we're forming content acquired from the past. And those realities that appear to be current, true, present moment experiences aren't. And the measuring stick for that, the time to start to question your reality is there any form of hostility or fear? Now, the mind is skillful at making up all kinds of reasons to have you go, oh, I'm so angry because, oh, I'm so hurt because, oh, I'm so sad because. I had someone who had, I'd done an interview with a Course in Miracles teacher over in, let's see, where was he? I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in Europe. And there was a question from a person who said, hey, I love the presentation, but, you know, there's a situation where these animals are being hurt, and, you know, why would I cancel my goal for them to be taken care of properly? So explain that as long as you hold a goal and that goal resonates any form of hostility or fear in you, you want to get rid of that goal, because the result of the goal loaded in the mind and recruiting into activity. Think of a goal as a recruiter. You know, the recruiter goes to the school to look at all the football players and see who they want to recruit, who they want to bring back for the, you know, the home team or whatever. Well, think of a goal as a recruiter. Through resonance, the goal goes through literally in an instant. Actually, I forget what the numbers are, but they've actually measured it's some fraction of a second. That perception is always in the past, always just a fraction of a second. They've measured exactly how long it takes for perception to show up. And of course, if it takes a fraction of a second for perception to show up, whenever you're looking at perception, you're looking at something that's a fraction of a second old, and therefore, you're looking at the past. So when images and pictures are just replays from the past, the untrained mind, it can't tell the difference. Part of this work and part of the whole purpose of Course in Miracles is a mind training process, so that we can distinguish whether we're reliving an hallucinated reality or this is an accurate perceptual construct. One of the indicators that it's an hallucination is there's hostility or fear, which means the mind's using corrupt data. And the idea of forgiveness is to get rid of corrupt data. Because if current perception is being formed from the past, obviously it can't be the truth. You know, you look at that lesson in the Course in Miracles, what is the world? and the world that the Course is looking at, it defines it in the first sentence in that lesson: the world is false perception. And that world of false perception, the Course says, is a world made up by us to take the place of what the Creator gave us in creation. Anything based in hostility or fear, I mean, literally in our minds, structured by our minds, depending what a goal recruits, sets up a whole construct. Now, if my construct is based in pain, then I want to cancel that goal, even if it's the most wonderful goal in the world. It's not that there's anything wrong with the goal. I mean, usually the goals people cancel are reasonable, decent. You know, everybody should want this kind of goals. The measuring stick as to whether or not you cancel it is, when you load it in your mind, does it recruit some form of hostility or fear into your perception, into activity? And again, hostility or fear means the mind's using corrupt data to produce that whole world that you see. And a thought from the past manipulated into the pretense of a live, present moment appearance is still a lie. So I cancel a goal, not because I don't want it, not because I can't have it, not because it's not a wonderful thing for me to have. I cancel a goal because I recognize that it has called up some form of hostility or fear from my mind, from my genes, from somewhere in my past. And when I cancel that goal, what happens is that which has been called up and formulated into a picture collapses in on itself. Now that it's collapsed in on itself, when I cancel the goal and I stay in awareness, I can follow that collapsing structure of perception into the root in my mind. So one of the things to really do when you cancel a goal, when you're doing a worksheet, is really pay attention to what comes next the instant you cancel that goal. And having spent 40 plus years working with people with the worksheet process, it always amazes me what memories come, what people's perception collapse into. It's seemingly totally unrelated, but all of a sudden, there's somebody facing the trauma of a 3-year-old. And once they allow that to come forward, breathe and work through it, all of a sudden they see that parallel that's played out in their lives over and over and over again. Remember, the why is this happening to me again experience is a repeating reality in the mind. It's not about repeating events in the world. People who live in projection will believe it's repeating events in the world because they make every event out of the same corrupt data. But if you truly look at the situations are as different as night and day. So this work is about learning to remove habitual thought disorders, generational patterns. And if you were brought up in a world totally free from all forms of hostility or fear in your culture and in your family system, then you can throw this work away. It's not of any use to you. You don't need it. But if you're brought up in a world where there was any form of hostility or fear, the person or event you think causes your pain only surfaces realities that are already within you. And the mind manipulates that underlying data to make it look like it fits the circumstances, and the problem really is the circumstance. So with tools, a painful experience can be the opportunity for monumental healing, like beyond comprehension. Literally, the chance to forgive is a chance to undo or dismantle generations of inherited, repeating traumas. Now, life abhors us holding on to and hiding our disease processes. So what's life going to do? Through resonance, life is going to draw to us circumstances. And denial is the main tool that keeps people from looking inside themselves. What is denial? Pardon me, the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of one is a cause of what's moving inside. That looks like anything based in, you hurt me, you made me sad, that upset me, they disturbed me, that really frightens me. All of those statements are statements that show that the mind is in denial. And that's the main tool that people use to keep from looking at what's going on inside of them. And it's the reason why the refusal to forgive is the reason why we repeatedly experience the impact of those hidden energies. To the point where people say, oh, well, it's just fate. That's the way the world is. You remember that quote from Carl Jung? Until the unconscious becomes conscious, we will call it pain. Pardon me. Till the unconscious becomes conscious, we will call it fate. And when you bring the unconscious to the conscious, and there's only one person I know of in all of history that understood how to do this on a consistent, persistent basis. One person knew who had the tool of correction, and that is in first century Aramaic forgiveness. It's a tool that leads inside and heals disturbed energies that we've been carrying in many cases for generations. Instead of dealing with pain, most get stuck in the blame game. The objective here is to deal with the pain. So life says, if you've got pain in you, I'm going to come hammer you there. Wherever the energy is, whatever the energy is, you're going to tell me, the world is going to dance to your tune. Whatever pain you have unresolved sets up a literal energy field that will draw to you someone who will play it out with you. And the objective is to breathe, to let yourself be with your pain, to absorb, to hold and bring that pain to the presence of love. And that means the end of unconscious patterns. Now, it's we who convert our unresolved energies into images of the ominous them, the false pictures, the projection. You know, the culture teaches projection as taking something that's inside of you and putting it outside of you. That's not projection. Taking something that's inside of you and pretending that it's outside of you is externalization. Taking something that's inside of you and building a world of perception out of it is what projection is. Making images out of the false mind energy or the corrupt mind energy that you hold within you. And of course, the way you tell whether or not pain you're feeling is yours or not, you ask yourself a very, very difficult question. Am I the one who's feeling it? And when I realize that I'm the one who's feeling it, then I realize this is an energy held in me. This is a self-generated, self-imposed world, which if I don't have the tools, and I don't bother to use the tools to change the concept of my own mind, seems impossible to escape. And that's because it's usually based on generations of errant perception, generation of unresolved pain, generations of power person dynamics. And when those power person dynamics are pounded in and reinforced generation after generation after generation, it leads to people living pretty much an unconscious life. And go back and read that story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. That's precisely what we're talking about here. That was not a story about a group of people who got lost in a 35 square mile sandy hot place for 40 years. That story is a story about people living in the unconscious, living in errant perception, replaying generations of unresolved pain. Remember, the key to getting out of the desert was what? They said the old generation has to die off. That didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. It meant that those generational patterns, the root of the word janari is cause, and the cause is held in the mind that lead to those errant perceptions, that lead to us sending out. Remember, we talked about the dust devils of energy in the world of quantum physics, that there's no matter there, it's an energetic pattern. And we send out those patterns which call into us the repeated patterns. And as long as the energetic pattern is based in some form of hostility or fear, wherever it is stored within the structure, literally there's going to be a dis-ease process happening there. The tissue structure is going to fall apart. So let's look at a totally different perspective than the one taught by the world of blame. When we feel pain without being touched, that pain is often a generational experience that is coming to the surface for healing. And when you free yourself from the capacity to generate that kind of internal pain, you'll be opening a space to free your generations and ultimately the world. This leads to what was called the peace that passes all understanding. And that's where the breath is required. What does it mean to live a life based in love? There is no hostility. There is no fear. There is no desperation. There is no activity that is out of harmony with love. Well, Michael, you're calling for the impossible. No, I'm not calling for the impossible. I'm calling for what's probably going to take a while to achieve. Like a while, meaning decades. You're designed to experience yourself, the actuality of being the active presence of love, and a conscious co-creator. Remember, when they left the promised land, where did they go? Or pardon me, when they left the desert, where did they go? The promised land. That's not some beautiful, fancy place. It's not about a place. It's about a state of mind. What is that alternative to the desert? It's a place where you are a conscious co-creator. You experience yourself as love and you originate, i.e. create, the life you choose to create. You live in a mind that's free of unresolved perceptual defects. And, that's pretty much a state that's indescribable today. One of the tests I offered yesterday was if you can sit quietly in the midst of the turmoil of the cognitive mind, if there's any going on inside of you, and feel the underlying current of serenity and love that's below the mind's disturbances, you're approaching the possible human life. Thoughts, mind energy consciously originated. There's a part of us that can originate and a part of us that executes whatever has been originated. If we're stuck in executing, just carrying out whatever is stored within us, then we're on the hamster wheel. Consciously sourcing mind energy was called the promised land, where thoughts are sourced from being from love and produce neuropeptides that not only support your direct experience of aliveness, but right down to the cellular level. That the well-being of the cell is given accurate data, accurate information, accurate feedback, instead of thoughts based in fear, hate, anger, self-deprecation, loss. Because whatever energy approaches the cell, it shows up in the cell. And if we're in pain or turmoil, it's just a warning signal that there's something going on that we need to look at, that we need to deal with. Glad to see you're breathing, Natalie. And I see your message of the weird choppy sound. I'm not sure if that's happening with everybody. If somebody else could make a note. And Natalie, I see your note. I'm struggling with letting go of my goal for unity for our democracy. So many people are already being affected by this. My fear is at the highest level since I left my last relationship. So many people are suffering. Yeah, you're right. And it sounds like you're being called on and invited to go to the next level of your healing. You know, if I'm thinking back to the relationship you're talking about, I think it was when we were around you, or spending time with you several years ago, and you sound like you're mustering the strength to get up to the next level of healing. And one of the things, Natalie, that you really want to do when you're doing the worksheet process, like I see you're identifying a goal here, goal for unity for our democracy. Now, if the pain that you're dealing with is about unity, and it might be unity within your family system or within your community, wherever the origin of that was, if that's what you're dealing with, then that's a really good worksheet to do. But I suspect that's not really it. I suspect that's a surface mind avoiding what you really want. What is it you really want? You want, let me just use an example, way out from left field, but just looking at the circumstances of the culture today. Let's say there's a certain authority figure in the culture that is brutalizing people. And I have pain come up in response to that. And part of the brutalization, if I tie it into your example here, is dividing people. The goal of unity will not heal the part of my mind, the file, so to speak, in my mind about myself or others being brutalized. So the goal you'd need to work with in that case would be the goal, you'd want to be canceling the goal for, let's say, and no intimation that this is anything personal, you but just an example based on what's happened with the culture, because I think one of the reasons there's so much support for some of the insanity that's going on in the culture today is people who have issues with daddy. And so the goal that would produce healing for someone who's supporting that kind of insanity that has issues with daddy, as the person doing the brutalization is well known to have issues with daddy, the goal that would produce healing would be for daddy to be loving, gentle, and respectful with me, or with my sister, or my brother, or with the neighbor, or mom, or my uncle, whoever. It's the goal has to be precise to the file in order to, the objective. Basically what happens when you cancel a goal is the file in the mind, information is stored in files, so to speak. The file in the mind related to that goal opens when you cancel that goal. So you could imagine that, let's say I'm in sadness and grief and fear, then over, the division that's being sown in the culture, then in my mind, there's a file on division. And the goal specifically that I'm holding that opens that file on division is the goal that will produce the result of healing. And it could be something in a totally different direction as well. As an example, taking that whole scenario, It could easily be, maybe I watched as a kid, again, just picking another example out of the air. I watched as a kid, and my brothers really went with dad and his being brutal. And the goal that's going to bring me healing is I watch the terror and trauma moving throughout the culture that's going to allow me to process the hidden part of my own mind in that situation, is going to be for my brother to step up, speak up, and hold dad accountable. That's going to produce a totally different healing result. So each time you do a worksheet, you want to specifically look at the goal that's involved. And, if you want to push the talk button and maybe get specific with this, we'd be delighted to the call button. Delighted to have that conversation if that would be helpful, if that would be supportive. And I'll breathe with you as you look at the crazies that are going on in the culture. And the objective here, to recognize that if I handle the pain, the disturbance, and upset in me that's resonated by some of the events in the world, then I can show up in the world as the conscious active presence of love. And in so doing, I bring a healing influence. When enough people bring a healing influence, that the field of active present love becomes strong enough to permeate and dissolve the pain in the mind perpetrating the insanity, then I've accomplished what I can do as an individual human being. When Yeshua says a little leaven leavens the whole loaf, he's inviting people to become the space of active love, to return to their human lives and bring their human lives to the world of insanity, the world of atrocities. You say, well, but that atrocity causes so much pain in me. No, that's denial. The atrocity does not cause the pain in me. If I can't offer active present love to the worst person in the world, to my darkest enemy, then I've lost my human life. The first order of business with Yeshua's working with this work is to reclaim your human life, to bring your human life to the atrocity, because it is the influence of the active presence of love that is the master solvent that dissolves the energetic patterns and the pain and the trauma that people are in that commit atrocities. So to gather enough people together who are willing to do the work on that level is the objective. And so let's just take, the strength of that comment. People are so cruel. If you look back at other times in your life, how often has cruelty been an issue for you? Right? But that was the issue 9 years ago when you left a relationship. What I'm going to offer now is I'm going to invite you to remember what the healing process looks like. So you left a relationship 9 years ago where cruelty was an issue, and you've been doing your work. I know I saw you the last time I was in Florida. You came to the workshops, and you were just rocking and supporting other people and doing, which means what I hear is what you've been doing is building strength. Now remember, when we talk about what's in naturopathic medicine is called a healing crisis, I have to ask myself some questions. One, am I doing more and more of the right things? Obviously you are. Two, just before this started to break loose, had I hit a new level of vitality? And what I'm hearing you saying is you're at a new level of vitality. So now you're able to uncover the grief and the pain that 9 years ago you weren't able to uncover and you walked away from. Does that fit? Does that make sense? No apology. That's the healing process. That's what healing looks like. It's not until I hit a new level of vitality, and that requires doing quote unquote the right things, whether it's nutritionally, whether it's with forgiveness, whatever it is I'm doing. If I'm doing the right things, I'm building my vitality. Well, remember the story you've heard me tell before at intensives. Imagine we've got a person that's a level 5 vitality. Yeah. And they have this level 7 toxin in them, this level 7 issue. And they're like, I know that's there and I want to get rid of it and I want to get rid of it. I want to get rid of it. I just can't get rid of it. I just can't do it. It's always there. Why is it always there? Because if I'm at a level 5 vitality and I have a level 7 toxin in me, if that level 7 toxin were literally to break open and break loose, it literally could physically kill me, the toxic release. So it's not until I've done the work to build from a level 5 vitality, I get to a 6, I get to a 7, I get to a level 7.5. And you've heard me, give this example before. I go to bed that night, I'm at a level 7.5 vitality. I've never been here before. This is awesome. I'm so excited. I go to bed, man, I got the world by the tail. And then I wonder when I get up in the morning if anybody got the number of the Mack truck that went through my room during the night. Because now I'm lower than a snake's belly. What the hell's wrong with this picture? Nothing's wrong with this picture. It's the perfect picture. Now that you've reached that new level of vitality, you're able to crack open. And what you're cracking open, you had an expression of 9 years ago, and maybe it goes back generation upon generation. What's your heritage, your genetic heritage?
Four.
Yep. Well, Natalie,
It's atrocious.
Yeah, it's atrocious. But there's a book about that you might want to read. It's called "Why Is This Happening to Me Again?"
No, I know.
Because whatever's in there is going to replay. You might want to. Let's see. What's the film I'm talking about? But that's what I was thinking about to get the clue. But I'm talking about Braveheart. Now, I watched in the early days of doing this work. Every time, there's one scene in that film that just triggered me into the depths of rage and pain. And that's the scene where, one of the soldiers, they're fighting whoever the enemy was, and the king says, "Send the Irish in." And the soldier, the general, whoever he is, says to the king, "Well, they'll slaughter them all. We have arrows. We can do it." And the king says, "Arrows cost money. Send in the Irish." Now, every time that I would have hate come up in me, I'd sit and watch that movie again and breathe through it. And I actually, in the early days, you've maybe heard me speak of this in intensives. I haven't talked about it in the radio show for a long time. But in the early days of doing this work, I had what I realized and labeled a hate muscle in me. And every time that unconscious hatred would resonate, I started to notice this muscle would tighten in my body. And I probably watched Braveheart 20 times and sat and did forgiveness work until I could get free of that hatred of the king.
I think mine is fear.
Got it. So then sit, watch it, breathe, and forgive. And as you process, this is the call for your next layer of healing. Your mind projects this pain into its brain's image of what's happening to these people, which is, I agree, absolutely horrendous. I agree with you. But that being horrendous is not the cause of my pain. What's moving in me is the cause of my pain. And remember our definition of denial. When I think or speak as though what's happening out there is the cause of what's moving in me, then I'm in denial, and I literally dissociate from or create an unconscious part of myself where I hide what I don't want to deal with. Now you've had shown to you the next level of this healing of cruelty and unfairness. And your task, should you choose to do it, is to heal that in you.
The irony of it
Irony
all
of it
is
all is
the the
the
people that
people
are
that
now
are now
perpetrating
perpetrating
this
this
are
are
the
the
ones who
ones who
suffered it.
suffered it. Yeah. Well, but remember from the codependency interdependence workshop, there are only 3 behaviors possible as long as somebody has a power person dynamic unconscious in their minds until they work it out. What are the 3 behaviors? When there's little or no stress, they'll do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they'll do what they did to resist and survive with
Right.
the power person. Do you remember the third one? When you become ultra
Yes.
stressed, what do?
You
You
do it,
do it,
whatever
whatever
you
you
saw your
saw your
power
power
person
person,
do that you swore to God you would never do.
and that you hated the most. That's it exactly. So under stress, until the power person dynamic is resolved. And, I think that these goings on, actually, if you go back to the first time, I think we all know the person we're talking about, but don't want to get political. But if you go back to the day after he was elected, we had a young woman call into the show and we processed rape because he was known as a rapist. And that was that was the day after that election in 2016. And that's what we were processing. And this man has given, if everyone who's projecting on him would stop, take a breath, and do the internal work, my offering is those who carry unresolved trauma have called forward someone to show them their trauma. On an individual basis, it happens every day in people's lives. That's the whole topic of my book. On a collective level, it happens. So when you can be the one who brings
Yes.
reclaims from your pain and trauma around brutality and unfairness and abuse, when you can clean that out of yourself and you can show up in the world as active present love, then you become one of the votes for hitting critical mass. And that is not going to stop. That's been going on planet Earth for thousands of years. It's not going to stop till we get enough people showing up as active present love in the presence of that insanity.
It just
It
feels
just
like
feels
it's
like
just
it's
going
just going
backwards.
backwards. No, it's called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's the cycle of creation. When we refuse to deal, this is a culture living in the desert, and the desert is just another code word for the unconscious, and they're playing out the why is this happening to me again experience again and again and again until what happens? The old generation dies off. The root of the word generation being Janari, which is cause. The cause is held in my mind that caused my pain and turmoil. When I am alleviated of it, I get to leave the desert. I get to move out of the unconscious position, and I get to show up in my own physiology and in the world as active present love. I reclaim my human life. And it's only when a critical mass of people, a little leavening, a critical mass of people make that reclamation and show up that energy is going to be transmuted and healed. The same as you do it on an individual level, it's going to happen on a collective level. But we have to get enough people through the gate. So I'm glad you're at the gate. I'm glad for you that you've done the work and you're courageous enough to let this surface in you. And we're here to hold the space. So what's the specific goal today when you look at people that you see suffering as a result of this cruelty? What's first of all the object of attention? Is it the people who are suffering, or is it the perpetrator of the insanity? What's your object of attention? So that would be a worksheet on yourself, but I'd offer there's a step before you go there, or in parallel with you going there, and that is as your mind is showing you its projections, there's a focus on the perpetrator of the act or the person that is being acted upon and suffering. Which is your object of attention?
Well, I guess I'd
Well, I
like to
guess
go
I'd
to the
like to go to the
perpetrator
perpetrator. Okay.
and release
So
my
release my
goal
goal for breathe.
him to keep
To
people
keep
safe.
people safe. There you go. Safe. Now, let me ask a question. If you go back 9 years ago, you're in a relationship and you left, what was the number one problem in that relationship? You never felt safe?
Well, I guess I didn't even realize that. I
Okay.
hadn't even admitted the same.
Okay. So there are three worksheets: kindly, fairly, and to be safe. So they'd be three major pieces of work for you to do. And everybody that's on the show listening right now is joining you in doing that. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had 2 or 3 interactions energetically with the person that you're speaking about and offering them support in processing the pain that was inflicted on them. And if you read about that man's life, his childhood was horrendous. Well, that's one aspect of it. But right now, with what's in your face, the second aspect of it is that now that that goal is not being fulfilled, you want to process this next layer that is so deeply traumatic for you. Need for people to be treated fairly.
Cancel
I
the
can't.
need for people to be treated fairly.
Yeah,
Cancel the need for people to be safe.
right. And then apply that to yourself as well. For me to be safe,
Yes.
for me to be treated fairly,
Yes.
for me to be treated with honesty and respect.
Yes.
And notice that breath you took just before you said that. That's where you touched into the part of you that is your next layer that's got to peel off. I heard the breath there that was the release breath. Well, and usually when people can't do still point by themselves, it's because they can't get enough energy going to overcome their own unconscious resistance. That's why they need someone there to facilitate. That's totally typical. I mean, over the years, and I've breathed thousands of people over the years, rare is the person who, once they have done the still point process and begin to understand it, that can do it by themselves, for themselves. It takes time to get to the level where it's kind of like, if you think about it as gravity. You know, we have a spaceship that's on the Earth, and it has to create a counter force of gravity to allow the spaceship to break free of the Earth's influence, gravitational pull. In the still point breathing process, the vitality to overcome the gravity of the generational pattern and the individual pattern of holding on to this trauma, the gravity of that's a similar thing. It's huge. And in the initial phases of doing the still point work, it usually takes having someone there with you to create enough oomph to pull away from, to get out of the resistance and the holding of the breath, the pattern of holding the breath that's been done. So that's pretty typical. Breathing with you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, everybody.
We're honored to have the opportunity and delighted to be here with you. Thanks for opening this up. It's not just your issue, believe me.
I know it's not just my issue.
Do your own work first. That's it, exactly. You got it. That's what it takes.
Love you, Michael. Love you, Jeannie.
Holding the space, breathing with you. Go ahead and breathe. We've only got 2 or 3 minutes. Let's everybody just connect into this. Yeah. And let's imagine as together we breathe, that breath is touching both those who are experiencing being victimized and those who hold so much unconsciousness and pain that they are not cognizant of the damage they're doing.
Oh.
and the dissolution of that level of pain. And I'm going to invite everybody that this is an issue for to pick up, and Jeannie and I will do it tonight as well. I'm going to invite everybody to watch the movie Braveheart. When I say this, I mean, I seriously, I'm going back when that movie first came out. I probably went through that movie 15 times to process my hatred. Which, if anybody had asked me, what did I ever hate? I'd have said no. But that movie triggered in me what I otherwise wasn't able to see.
When I finally processed through the fear, the hate will probably come up.
Yep. Underneath it. And actually the biggest drug that most people use is the hostility, the anger. The anger is, our culture treats anger as an emotion, but anger is not an emotion. Anger is a literal, internally produced anesthetic. It's a drug that we anesthetize ourselves with. That's why most people are addicted to anger. If you look at the perpetrator of what we're talking about here, notice the rage time after time over virtually everything. That's, and that man is well known for, he doesn't use alcohol, but he uses rage in the place of alcohol would be my offering.
Yes, he does.
That's his drug of choice. And that means the pain level is unfathomable for him. And so let's join in holding
Breathing for his pain.
Exactly. Let's join in holding space for his and every other person in this world and in history that has ever functioned out of that kind of trauma and pain. Let's be the space. Let's embrace that. Let's join. You remember Yeshua in the Garden of Gethsemane? They said he took on the sins of the world. That didn't mean he fell into suffering. That meant he felt clear enough, connected enough to love to say, okay, I'm going to work with you to process every unresolved energy on the planet. Let's join that.
I invite Rick to come.
Yes, exactly. Let's every one of us join that team in holding the space for that. And that doesn't mean that should the opportunity come, we don't hold a person accountable, but we can hold a person accountable out of that state of active present love because we have no projections on that kind of behavior. That's the only way the world's going to heal ultimately.